The boy grew up in a quiet town where most days felt slow and simple. His family lived in a small apartment that looked out over narrow streets, and he often spent time by the window watching people walk by. His parents worked long hours, and there were no luxuries in their home. Still, the place felt warm, because everyone tried to support each other, even when life was difficult. From a young age, he liked soft sounds. He would tap gently on pots, plates, or wooden tables, listening to the tiny echoes they made. No one thought much of it at first. People assumed he was just playing around, like any child might do. But he seemed to hear things in a different way. When others heard noise, he heard patterns. Even his teachers noticed how quickly he recognized rhythms. One afternoon, when he was around 8 years old, he followed his father to the community center. His father sometimes worked small jobs there, cleaning or helping move equipment. While his father worked, the boy wandered through the halls, curious about every door and every sign. Then he stepped into a room and saw something he had never seen up close before. It was an old upright piano. The black paint was chipped, the keys were yellow, and the bench shook if you moved too quickly. But the moment he saw it, his eyes stayed, locked on it. He moved closer without thinking about it. His small hand touched the cool surface of the keys, and he pressed one gently. The note that came out was a little out of tune, but to him it sounded magical. He tried another key. Then another. Soon both hands were exploring. Some notes rang sharp, others felt heavy, but he kept touching them, drawn in by a sound he didn't fully understand but felt inside. His father walked in and told him not to break anything, but he noticed how focused the boy was. Normally, he ran around and never stayed in one place. But this was different. That old piano became the boy's escape. Whenever his father worked at the center, he begged to come along. He would sit at the piano for hours, pressing random keys, trying to copy melodies he heard on TV or from the small radio at home. The instrument was not great, but it was enough for him to feel something awaken. His family could not afford lessons. Money was tight, and even buying school supplies felt heavy for them. So the idea of paying for a private teacher felt impossible. But the boy did not complain. Instead, he learned in his own way. He watched videos when he could, listened to classical music on his father's old phone, and tried to copy anything he heard. Because he had no guidance, he made mistakes. His hands were stiff, and his posture was not correct. But his determination was strong. He practiced until his fingers felt tired, and he would look at the keys with a seriousness that made him seem older than he really was. One late evening, something changed for him. His father was cleaning the main hall, and the boy wandered back into the room with the piano. The lights were dim, and only one bulb flickered above him. He sat on the shaky bench and pressed a few notes, trying to play a simple tune. Then a melody began playing from a speaker in the hallway. Someone had forgotten to turn off the radio. It was a recording of Chopin. The boy had never heard such music before. The melody was rich and powerful, full of emotion he could not name. Then the piece shifted into something grand and intense. The notes felt like waves crashing, like wind lifting something into the sky. It was Chopin's heroic Polonaise. He froze. His fingers hovered over the keys as he listened. The sound filled him in a way nothing had before. It was not just music. It was something larger, something bright and fierce. He felt the pull inside his chest, as if the music spoke directly to him. He didn't know how to describe it, but he knew this piece was different. It felt like a story, a battle, a victory, all happening at once. From that moment, something changed. He wanted to understand how someone could make music that powerful. He wanted to feel that strength in his own hands. But the heroic Polonaise was known to be incredibly difficult, even for trained pianists. A child with no lessons had no chance of playing it, not in the eyes of anyone who knew the piece. Still, the boy didn't care. Something inside him had opened, and he couldn't close it. He went home and asked his parents if they knew the name of the music he heard. They didn't, but he hummed the tune, trying to keep it alive in his mind. The next day he looked it up on his father's phone. When he finally found it, he listened to it again and again. Sometimes he played it quietly so he wouldn't use too much data. Other times he memorized parts of it and tapped them out on his school desk. His classmates thought he was strange because he always tapped rhythms with his fingers. But he didn't care. The song was stuck in his mind like a fire that refused to go out. He tried to play small parts of it on the old community center piano. Of course, he couldn't match the real piece. The notes were too fast, the jumps too large, the patterns too complex. But every day he tried. Slowly, tiny pieces began to make sense to him. He would spend long minutes trying to get a single phrase right, even if it meant repeating it again and again. His mother sometimes worried that he was becoming too obsessed. She would tell him to rest, to focus on school, to make sure he didn't forget other responsibilities. But she also saw the light in his eyes whenever he talked about music. She had never seen him so passionate about anything else. The boy's world grew around the piano. Even when he couldn't play it, he imagined it. He memorized the layout of the keys, pictured the chords in his mind, and practiced finger motions. On the air, he was teaching himself in a way that felt strange, but it was the only way he knew. One day, a small storm hit the town, and his father said they should stay home. The boy felt restless, wishing he could go to the community center to practice. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table and tapped out melodies on the surface. When the rain got heavier, the room grew darker, and he closed his eyes. In his mind, he could hear the heroic Polonaise growing louder. He imagined himself playing it, even though he knew he was far from capable. But imagining it gave him comfort. It made him feel strong in a way he couldn't explain. When the storm ended, he rushed to the community center the next day. His father laughed, saying it was the first time he had ever seen him leave the house so quickly. The boy sat at the piano, placed his fingers on the keys, and tried to play the opening of the piece. It was messy, slow, and uneven, but he didn't stop. He kept pushing, kept trying, kept reaching. The community center workers sometimes heard him playing. Some smiled, thinking it was cute. Others told him to play more quietly because the sound carried down the halls. The piano tuner, who visited once a year, told the boy the instrument was too old and too damaged for serious practice. But the boy didn't care. It was the only piano he had. He would sit there until the sun went down. At times, he felt frustrated. His hands were too small, his arms too weak, and his knowledge too little. But whenever he thought about giving up, the sound of Chopin's music came back into his mind, reminding him of the moment he first heard it. It became a dream he held close, even if it felt impossible. Years passed, and he became more skilled, though he never thought he was good enough. He still practiced on the same old piano, and he still learned everything by watching, listening, and observing. He had no teacher, no proper training, no expensive equipment, but he had heart, he had patience, and above all, he had the burning desire to understand the music that once captured him in that dimly lit room. The story of how he would one day break boundaries did not begin with applause, awards, or formal lessons. It began here on an old piano in a quiet town, with a boy who believed that even the most powerful music could be reached, one slow note at a time. The boy continued to grow, and so did his connection to the piano, even though he still practiced. On the old community center instrument, something inside him kept pushing him forward. Every day after school, he would hurry to the building, sometimes arriving before his father finished work. He didn't care if someone else was using the halls or if people walked past him. Once he sat in front of the piano, the rest of the world faded. But as he grew older, the challenges around him began to increase. Schoolwork became harder, and teachers expected more from him. His parents, already tired from long shifts, wanted him to focus on grades. They worried that if he spent too much time on music, he might fall behind. They didn't want him to lose opportunities in the future. So conversations at home started to change. His mother would gently remind him to spend more hours on homework. His father would tell him that playing piano was fine, but he had to keep his priorities straight. They never shouted at him, but the pressure was always there, sitting quietly in the background. Some nights, after everyone went to bed, the boy sat by the window, thinking about everything he wanted. Music felt like something alive inside him, something he couldn't ignore. But life outside those keys felt heavy. Expectations, schedules, tests, and decisions all formed walls around him. And yet, he still wanted to play. He still wanted to reach the music that had captured him years ago. At school, things weren't any easier. Some classmates treated him kindly, but others teased him for always tapping on desks and humming classical tunes. They didn't understand why anyone his age would be interested in music that sounded so old. They laughed when he tried to explain the feeling it gave him. Eventually, he stopped explaining and stayed quiet. He would walk home with his head down, but as soon as he stepped into the community center, the weight lifted. The piano was still there, waiting. Even with its chipped keys and uneven sound, it felt like a friend. He would place his hands on the keys and begin practicing the same difficult passages again and again. Still, he knew that without guidance, he was making slow progress. He didn't know proper technique. His posture was uneven. His fingers were too tense. Sometimes he hurt his wrist from using the wrong motion. But he didn't know how to fix it. He only knew how to keep trying. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. While he was practicing the opening of a complex piece he barely understood, an older man walked into the room. The man was carrying sheet music under his arm and seemed to be in a hurry. But when he heard the boy struggling through the melody, he stopped. The boy didn't notice him at first. He was too focused, his jaw clenched, his fingers fighting through each measure. But then the man spoke. "Who taught you that?" he asked. The boy jumped lightly in surprise and turned around. The older man wasn't smiling, but his eyes were full of interest. "No one," the boy answered softly. The man raised an eyebrow. "No one?" The boy shook his head. There was a long pause. The man walked closer, listening to the lingering sound of the piano. He could tell right away that the boy had no formal training. The posture, the hand shape, the finger movement, they were all wrong. But the sound coming out of the piano wasn't empty. It carried emotion, even if it was messy. After a moment, the man asked him to play the piece again. The boy hesitated, but obeyed. He placed his hands on the keys and tried again. He knew he wasn't good, but he didn't want to refuse someone who seemed interested. As he played, he felt nervous, but the music pushed him forward. When he finished, the man exhaled slowly. "Your technique is all over the place," he said honestly, "but you hear the music. That's rare." The boy wasn't sure what to say. He simply stared at him, unsure if it was praise or criticism. The man finally introduced himself as someone who used to teach music before retiring. He explained that he came to the community center sometimes to borrow sheet music or help organize small events. He hadn't expected to find someone practicing so passionately. He told the boy to try a different hand position. Then he corrected his arm posture. Then he made him play one short phrase again, and again, and again. By the time the boy finally got it right, The man gave him a small nod. Better, he said. From that day on, the older man would occasionally stop by the piano room whenever he visited the center. He never became a full teacher. He didn't give long lessons or strict assignments, but he offered advice, small, meaningful advice that helped the boy improve. He taught him how to relax his hands, how to feel the weight of the keys, how to breathe with the rhythm. He showed him exercises to strengthen his weak fingers and explained why some passages felt impossible. He even taught him how to listen carefully, not just with his ears, but with his heart. The boy improved faster than anyone expected. People at the center noticed that the piano, once ignored by most visitors, now carried music that sounded more thoughtful and confident. Even those who didn't care for classical music found themselves pausing to listen. But with improvement came new challenges. The boy realized that the more he learned, the more he didn't know. The music he loved was far more complex than he had first imagined. The heroic Polonaise, especially, felt like a mountain too tall to climb. He would listen to recordings of the piece and feel torn between hope and doubt. How could someone with barely any training ever hope to play something like that? It felt like reaching for the sky with only one hand. Yet every time he felt discouraged, he returned to the piano. He practiced slowly, breaking down passages into tiny parts. He spent whole afternoons trying to understand just one measure. And when he finally managed to play a small section smoothly, he felt as though the world had given him a new reason to keep going. Still, not everyone believed in him. Some workers at the center would tell him to choose something simpler. Others laughed softly and said he was dreaming too big. Even some family friends told his parents that piano practice was a waste of time for a child with no formal lessons. He heard all of it. Sometimes their voices felt louder than the music. But deep down, something inside him refused to let go. He didn't know why. He didn't know how. But he felt that he had to keep trying. Then came one evening that changed everything. The older man who sometimes helped him walked in holding a thick binder. He placed it on the piano and opened it. Inside were pages of sheet music, the entire heroic Polonaise. The boy froze. "I know you're not ready," the man said calmly, "but if you really want to understand this piece, you have to see it, not just hear it." The boy reached out and touched the pages as if they were something sacred. There were symbols, lines, and markings he barely understood. But the idea of holding the music he had loved for so long made his heart beat faster. The man pointed to certain passages. He explained how the left hand carried the foundation, how the right hand needed strength and control, how the rhythm had to move like a heartbeat. He spoke about the story inside the music, how Chopin wrote it during a time of struggle, how every note carried determination and fire. The boy listened closely, absorbing each word. "It is not just a piece," the man said. "It is a challenge, a test of strength, a declaration." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand everything, but he understood enough. He knew that this piece was more than music. It was something he wanted to devote himself to. When the man left the room, the boy sat there silently. His fingers hovered over the keys. He did not try to play the piece right away. Instead, he played simple scales, letting his thoughts settle. He felt fear, excitement, pressure, hope. He knew the road ahead would be hard. But something inside him whispered that the challenge was worth it. Over the next weeks, he practiced more seriously. He kept the sheet music close, studying the patterns even when he wasn't at the piano. He practiced finger exercises at school, ignored teasing from classmates, and focused harder than ever. His parents noticed the change. They still asked him to keep up with school, but they also realized that music brought him a sense of purpose. When they saw him work late into the night, tired yet determined, they understood he was not simply playing. He was building something. People at the community center also started noticing. The once shy boy now played with more confidence. His sound was stronger, his timing more precise, his expression deeper. But even as he grew, new doubts appeared. The more he improved, the more he realized how far he still had to go. He listened to recordings of real pianists and felt overwhelmed. Their speed, strength, and control felt impossible to match. Sometimes, after a difficult practice, he would sit quietly, feeling the weight of his dreams. But he didn't stop. His journey was becoming more intense, more personal, and more challenging. Each day brought small victories and small setbacks. Each evening, he sat at the old piano, chasing a dream that felt both impossibly far and close enough to touch. He didn't know it yet, but these challenges, these doubts, and these small moments of progress were shaping his future. They were turning him into someone stronger, someone capable of facing the path that lay ahead. And soon, life would bring him an opportunity he never expected, one that would test everything he had learned and everything he believed about himself. Weeks continued to pass, and the boy's world slowly began to revolve around something he had never expected, a chance to prove himself. It began with a poster taped to the wall of the community center hallway. The paper was bright yellow, and the announcement was printed in bold letters. It read, "National Youth Music Competition, open to ages 10 to 18. He saw it while walking to the piano room, his hands still cold from the winter air. At first, he only glanced at it, thinking it was something meant for kids who had real lessons, real teachers, real opportunities. He kept walking, but something made him stop. He turned back and read the poster more carefully. The competition allowed each participant to choose one classical piece of their choice. There would be regional rounds, then national finals. It wasn't just a small local talent show. This was something big, something serious. He stood there staring at the paper for a long time. He imagined himself on a stage. He imagined hearing applause. He imagined making mistakes. He imagined freezing in front of strangers. His heart beat faster at the thought. He didn't tell anyone about the poster that day. He practiced like usual, trying to focus, but the idea kept distracting him. That night at home, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what it would feel like to enter something like that. Part of him felt excited, but another part felt scared. Why would someone like him enter a real competition? Who would believe he belonged there? The next day, he walked past the poster again. This time, he read every detail. The age groups, the rules, the deadlines. His stomach tightened when he realized the sign-up period would end soon. He told himself it was impossible. He had no teacher, no proper instrument, no money to travel, no confidence. And yet, the idea refused to leave his mind. After a few days of thinking, he finally gathered the courage to ask the older man at the community center about it. The man listened quietly, his expression calm in the way it always was. "So you want to enter?" the man asked. "I don't know," the boy answered truthfully. "Maybe, but I don't think I'm good enough." The man didn't answer right away. He studied the boy's face, then looked down at the sheet music. The boy had been practicing. "Most people never feel ready," the man finally said. "If you wait for confidence to arrive on its own, you'll wait forever. You have to create it." The boy lowered his eyes. His hands felt cold, and his throat felt tight. "What would I even play?" he whispered. The man raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "You already know the answer." The boy looked at the sheet music of the heroic Polonaise resting on the piano. His heart beat faster. He shook his head quickly. "I can't play that," he said. "It's impossible." The man shrugged. "It's hard, but impossible? That depends on you." The boy knew the piece was beyond him. He understood only bits of it, fragments he had practiced slowly. The thought of performing it in front of judges was terrifying, but the piece meant something to him. It was the song that had started everything. It was the music that had captured him when he was young. It was the sound he carried in his mind for years. He went home that night thinking of nothing else. Over the next few days, he watched videos of past competitions on his father's phone. The performers were incredible. Their hands moved with ease, their posture was perfect, their performances confident. He saw people his age who had teachers, grand pianos at home, and years of training. He felt small watching them. His chest tightened with doubt. But every time he wanted to put the idea away, the image of the poster came back to him. Finally, after many restless nights, he made a decision. He went back to the community center, waited until the older man arrived, and quietly said, "I want to enter." The man didn't look surprised. Instead, he nodded, as though he had been waiting to hear those words. "Then we start today," he said. The boy took a deep breath. Something in him felt lighter, even though he was still scared. They began working more seriously. The man became stricter. He corrected every mistake, repeated every phrase, pushed the boy to practice with more discipline. The boy's fingers hurt more often. His back ached from long hours on the bench. He practiced until his hands shook. But every time the man told him to stop, he begged for a few more minutes at home. He practiced finger exercises quietly on the kitchen table to avoid disturbing his family. He studied sheet music late at night, tracing each passage with his eyes. His parents worried about him, but when they saw the determination in his expression, they found it difficult to stop him. Still, not everything went smoothly. There were moments when frustration hit him hard. Sometimes he couldn't get a passage right no matter how hard he tried. Sometimes he felt like the more he practiced, the worse he became. He even had days where he slammed the piano keys in anger, then immediately felt guilty. One day, after a particularly difficult practice, he sat on the floor beside the piano and covered his face with his hands. He felt defeated. The piece was too difficult. The competition was too big. Maybe everyone who doubted him was right. The older man walked in quietly, noticing the boy's slumped posture. "Stand up," the man said. The boy didn't move. "I said stand up," the man repeated, his voice gentle but firm. Slowly, the boy rose to his feet. "You think others succeed because they are never frustrated?" the man asked. "No, they succeed because they push through frustration. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to feel tired, but you are not allowed to quit." The boy looked down at the floor. The man placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have something rare," he said. "You have heart. Don't throw it away." The boy nodded, swallowing hard. He returned to the piano, sat down, and began practicing again. The days moved forward quickly after that. The boy began to improve faster. His hands grew stronger. His sense of rhythm sharpened. He could play passages he once thought impossible. Even though he was far from mastering the entire piece, he was building confidence, one small victory at a time. Then the registration deadline approached. The boy hesitated before filling out the form. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the pen. The older man stood beside him, watching quietly. "Once I sign this, I have to go through with it," the boy whispered. "That's the point." The man said. The boy took a deep breath, signed the form, and handed it to the community center clerk who processed registrations for events. It felt unreal. He had actually entered. When he told his parents, they were shocked. At first, they didn't know what to say. They looked at each other silently, unsure whether to support or discourage him. Finally, his mother said, "If this is your dream, we won't stand in your way." His father added, "But you have to promise you'll still focus on school too." "I will," the boy said, Though he knew balancing both would be hard. After that, life changed. He felt a new kind of pressure. The competition no longer felt like a dream. It felt real, and it scared him. But it also pushed him. He practiced harder than ever before. He studied the heroic Polonaise like someone studying a map before a long journey. Sometimes he wrote notes in a small notebook, marking difficult spots and reminding himself of corrections. The community center workers began to notice his progress. Some offered encouraging words. Others shook their heads and muttered that he was aiming too high. A few students his age laughed when he told them the name of the piece he was preparing. Why would you choose something like that? One boy asked, even adults struggle with it? Another shrugged and said, you'll embarrass yourself. The words stung, but he tried to let them slide off him. He reminded himself that people who doubted him didn't understand what the music meant to him. Then came a day when the older man handed him a small portable keyboard. It wasn't fancy, but it was something he could take home. You need more practice time, the man said. This isn't a real piano, but it's better than nothing. The boy's eyes widened. He accepted the keyboard with both hands, unable to speak. He knew the man didn't have much money. Giving him the keyboard meant something meaningful. Thank you, the boy whispered. Use it well, the man replied. He took the keyboard home and used it every night. The keys felt light and plastic, and the sound wasn't the same, but it allowed him to practice finger movements and patterns when he couldn't go to the community center. As the competition day drew closer, he felt both excitement and fear growing inside him. His dreams kept him awake at night. He imagined judges watching him, the bright lights, the sound of his mistakes echoing in the hall, but he also imagined playing the piece with strength. He imagined giving everything he had. 1 week before the regional round, the older man gathered him for a serious talk. You will make mistakes, the man said. Everyone does. But what matters is how you continue after the mistake. Don't stop. Don't freeze. Don't give up. The boy nodded. You have worked hard, the man continued. Now take that work and trust it. The boy felt nervous, but grateful. The night before the competition, he practiced slowly, focusing on expression instead of speed. He let the music move through him, remembering why he loved it in the first place. When he finally went to bed, he felt strange, not confident, but ready. Or as ready as he could be. The next morning, he dressed in his best clothes, though they were simple. His parents accompanied him, quietly supportive. At the competition venue, the hall was filled with young musicians, all carrying instruments, sheet music, and confidence. He felt small walking among them. Many looked polished and prepared, their families dressed nicely, their teachers giving last-minute advice. He clutched his small bag of sheet music, feeling his heartbeat in his throat. But when he stepped inside the performance hall and saw the grand piano on stage, everything inside him stirred. He felt the same pull he had felt years ago when the heroic Polonaise first played from the hallway speaker. He took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the beginning of something bigger than he had ever imagined. The day of the competition arrived with a strange mix of silence and noise. It was early morning when the young pianist woke up, and for a long moment they simply lay still, staring at the ceiling. Their heart felt heavy, not with fear exactly, but with the weight of everything they had carried for months. Every late night, every moment of doubt, every quiet whisper of hope, it all seemed to gather inside their chest as the sun slowly rose. The house was quiet. Their family moved around softly, trying not to disturb them. Even the air felt careful, like the whole world knew this was not an ordinary day. They got ready slowly, tying their hair back the way they always did when they needed full focus. Their hands trembled a little, but they shook them gently. Just as the old musician had taught loosen the fingers, relax the wrists, breathe. When they stepped outside, the air felt cool and fresh. The city was just waking up, but the young pianist already felt like they were walking into a different place, a different time. Today was not about school or chores or walking through crowded streets. Today was about something bigger, something they had worked for. With every quiet hour spent in front of a piano, their mentor met them near the competition hall. The old man wore simple clothes, the same kind he always wore, but his eyes were sharper today, full of something like pride. "You don't need to be perfect," he reminded gently. "Just be honest. Play the way the music lives inside you." Those words settled into the pianist's heart like a warm light. The competition building was full of people. Parents stood close to their children, adjusting collars, fixing hair, whispering last-minute advice. Many young musicians carried folders of sheet music pressed against their chests. Some stretched their fingers. Some looked around with sharp, confident eyes. Others, like the young pianist, stayed quiet. Everywhere they looked, there were faces full of expectation. And whether they meant to or not, many of those faces lingered on them a little too long. A 17-year-old announcing they would perform Chopin's heroic Polonaise had caused quite a buzz. The piece was known to be fierce, powerful, demanding, in every possible way. Most performers much older avoided it. For someone this young and from such a simple background to choose, it seemed almost unbelievable. Whispers followed the pianist through the hallway, but they kept walking. Inside the warm-up room, several other competitors were practicing short scales or slow sections of their chosen pieces. The sound of different pianos mixed together, creating a strange kind of music that wasn't music at all. The young pianists sat quietly on a bench, their hands resting on their lap. They did not play. Their mentor had told them not to. Save your strength. You know the piece. Trust yourself. So instead, the pianist closed their eyes and pictured the piano waiting on the stage. They imagined the first strong chords, the force of the left hand, the sweeping right hand that carried emotion like a wind. They imagined their heartbeats settling into the rhythm. They imagined the world going quiet. When their number was finally called, they felt a sudden stillness inside. Not calm, not exactly, but something clear. They walked backstage, where the only thing separating them from the audience was a thick curtain. Through it, they could hear the ending of the performer before them. Applause rose like a wave, short, polite, controlled. The pianist took a breath. This was it. The stage manager gave a small nod. And then the curtain opened. The hall was larger than anything the pianist had imagined. Lights washed the stage in warm brightness, and beyond them sat hundreds of people, their faces blending into soft shadows. The judges sat in a straight line near the front, their expressions unreadable. A single grand piano waited in the center of the stage. The young pianist walked toward it with slow, steady steps. Their shoes touched the stage softly. Their breath steadied. Their hands felt warm, almost too warm. They reached the piano bench, sat down, and adjusted it the way they always had, a small shift forward, feet placed exactly where they needed to be. For a moment, they did nothing. Then they placed their hands on the keys. The audience held its breath, and with the first chord, everything changed. The sound did not come out hesitant or small. It came out strong, so strong that the closest judge blinked in surprise. The opening of the heroic Polonaise filled the hall with the bold, fiery energy that Chopin had written more than a century ago. Yet something about it felt new, alive, almost like it belonged to the pianists themselves. Each note seemed to come from a place deeper than simple practice. It was the weight of all those early mornings, all those long nights. It was the memory of finding music in an old community center. It was the first time they had fallen in love with the Polonaise. It was the echo of their mentor's quiet encouragement. As the young pianist played, something strange and beautiful happened. The hall grew completely silent. People leaned forward in their seats. The pianist's hands moved with a mixture of power and grace, not mechanical, not forced, but alive, breathing, full of something impossible to describe with words. The judges exchanged quick glances. They were hearing something rare. Near the middle of the piece, the part that often caused performers to stumble, the pianist's fingers flew with confidence built from months of quiet practice. Their expression softened for a second, then sharpened again as the energy of the piece rose. Every part of them seemed connected to the piano, their breath, their heartbeat, even the way their shoulders moved out to the audience. It felt like watching a story told without words. The dramatic final measures came like a storm breaking open. The pianist's hands struck the keys with force, but not wild, force-controlled, intentional, full of emotion. They knew the ending well. They had lived inside these notes for so long that the music felt like a part of their body. When the last chord rang through the hall, it lingered like a held breath. For a long moment, no one moved, and then the applause began. It was not polite or simple. It was loud, rising quickly, spreading through the hall like fire. People looked at one another in disbelief. Some shook their heads, not because they disapproved, but because they could not believe someone so young had played with such depth. The pianist's vision blurred slightly as they stood and bowed. The stage lights felt warm on their face. They did not smile widely, just a small, almost shy curve of the lips, but inside, a soft, trembling joy bloomed. They stepped off the stage as the applause continued, and backstage, their mentor waited with eyes shining. He did not rush forward. He did not shout. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on their shoulder. "You played with your heart," he said quietly. "That's what people hear." The young pianist felt something inside them relax for the first time all day. The nerves, the tension, the expectations, all of it eased, but they also knew the competition was not over. Other performers still waited. Judges still had decisions to make. Nothing was guaranteed. Still, as they sat in the quiet backstage room, listening to the muffled music from the stage, they felt something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. They had played honestly, just as they were told. They had given everything they had. Now, all that remained was to wait and see if the world had heard it. When the young pianist stepped out of the backstage room, the applause from their performance was still echoing in their ears. It felt unreal, almost like a dream they were still trying to wake up from. Their hands were warm, their hearts still beating hard, but there was also a gentle calm settling slowly inside. They had given everything to that performance, and for the first time, they truly felt it had reached the people who listened, that the competition was far from over. More performers went on stage, one after another. Some played softly, some played powerfully, each adding their own emotion to the air. The young pianist sat quietly beside their mentor, trying not to imagine what the judges were thinking. At one point, their mentor leaned in and whispered, "Let the others play. You've done what you came to do. Don't compare yourself now." Pianist nodded. They knew it was true, but it was still hard. Every time a strong performer stepped off the stage to loud applause, a small, sharp fear pressed into their chest. That fear whispered things like, "Maybe you weren't enough," or "Maybe the judges will choose someone safer." They tried to ignore it. Hours passed before the final performer finished. Then the hall fell into that tense silence that always comes before an important decision. People shifted in their seats. Parents whispered softly to one another. Some competitors stared at the floor. Others stared straight ahead, trying to look confident. The young pianist felt their palms begin to sweat again. Finally, The head judge walked onto the stage, holding a small envelope in his hands. His expression was calm, but his eyes scanned the audience with care. He adjusted the microphone and spoke in a clear, even voice. "Thank you to everyone who performed today. Each of you brought something special to the stage. This decision was not easy. We took time to discuss not only technique, but expression, maturity, and the ability to tell a story through music." The pianist felt their heartbeat jump. Their mentor placed a steady hand on their arm. "Whatever happens," the old man whispered, "you made music today. Remember that." The judge continued speaking. "This year's top performer has shown a remarkable balance of strength and sensitivity. Their interpretation was bold and personal, and it displayed a depth rare for someone so young. We believe they brought something new to a legendary piece, something that cannot be taught in any classroom." Whispers spread through the audience. The pianist's breath froze. The judge opened the envelope. "First place goes to the young performer of Chopin's heroic Polonaise." For several seconds, the pianist did not move. They did not breathe. It was as if their mind refused to understand the words. Then their mentor nudged them gently. "Go," he whispered with a warm smile. The audience rose in applause as the young pianist walked to the stage. The lights felt even brighter now, almost too bright. Standing before the judges, they could hardly believe what was happening. The head judge shook their hand and offered a small trophy, but the moment felt bigger than anything that could fit in an object. What mattered was the sound of hundreds of people clapping, the way their mentor's eyes shone with pride, and the way their own heart felt full, not just with joy, but with gratitude. After the ceremony, the judges approached them, one by one. One of them, a woman known for being strict, looked at the pianist with a calm but sincere expression. "Your interpretation surprised me," she said. "You did not play it like a student. You played like someone who understands life deeper than your age." The pianist bowed respectfully, unsure how to respond. Another judge, a man with silver hair, added, "The Polonaise is famous for its strength, but few young performers capture its soul. You did. Keep growing. You have something special." Those words stayed in the pianist's heart long after the event ended. Their mentor walked beside them out of the hall, and for a long time they said nothing. They simply walked through the cool evening air, letting everything sink in. At last, the mentor stopped and turned to them. "You understand now, don't you?" he said. "Understand what?" the pianist asked, still dazed. "That music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. You played your truth today, and that is why they chose you." The pianist lowered their eyes, feeling a warmth spread through them that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. But the story didn't end there. By the next morning, clips of their performance were circulating on social media. Someone from the audience had recorded the entire piece and uploaded it with a caption full of excitement. Within hours, thousands of people had watched it, then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in from all over the country. "I've never heard the heroic Polonaise played like this. Who is this teenager? They play with such emotion. This gave me chills." The pianist's family saw the video too. Their parents watched it quietly at home, and something softened in their hearts, a realization of how deeply their child had been carrying this dream. Music schools across the country began reaching out with invitations. Some offered full scholarships. Some asked if the pianist would like to join special masterclasses. A few even asked if they would play at upcoming events. It was overwhelming. During all this, the young pianist remained humble and slightly unsure. Fame, even small fame, felt strange. They never imagined themselves on screens, in newspapers, or being discussed by people they had never met. What mattered to them was simpler. The piano, the music, and the feeling that their hard work had led them somewhere real. One evening, while they were practicing alone in the small room at home, their mentor called. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked. The pianist blinked. "Next?" "Yes," he replied with a small laugh. "Your journey is just beginning. Competitions are only doors. And you've just opened a big one. People want to hear you. They want to understand your story through your playing. You have a chance to go far if you stay true to who you are." The pianist's fingers rested on the keys. They felt a quiet excitement flutter in their chest. "I'm ready to try," they said softly. Their mentor's voice warmed. "That's enough. Trying with an honest heart is what brought you this far. It's what will carry you forward." In the following weeks, life changed quickly. Invitations arrived daily. Some were from classical academies. Others came from people organizing festivals. Newspapers wanted interviews. Music lovers wanted to know how someone so young had developed such depth. But one of the most meaningful invitations came from a small school in a nearby town. They asked if the pianist would visit and talk to the students, many of whom came from families who couldn't afford private music lessons. The young pianist accepted immediately. When they visited, they sat in front of a room full of children and spoke simply not as a star, but as someone who understood what it felt like to start with very little. They told the children that talent was only one part of the journey. The rest was patience, practice, and believing in the small steps that didn't seem important at first. The children listened with wide eyes, and some of them, just like the pianist, once had touched the piano keys with a spark of curiosity. Later, as the pianist walked home after the visit, they felt something settle inside them. Winning the competition had been incredible. The applause had been unforgettable. But inspiring someone else's dream, that felt like a different kind of achievement. And even though their future was growing bigger and brighter, they still returned to the old place where everything began. The community center piano, with its slightly uneven keys and soft pedals, still felt like home. They played there when they needed peace. They played when they wanted to remember who they were before anyone clapped for them. And every time their fingers touched those old keys, they carried the same feeling from the night of the competition. The feeling that music was not just sound, but connection. And that connection was what would guide them toward the journey ahead. Life began to move faster than the young pianist ever expected. In the weeks after the competition, opportunities continued to arrive in a steady stream, each one bigger than the last. At first, they tried to understand everything that was happening, the invitations, the interviews, the sudden attention from people they had never met. But eventually, they realized that some things were too big to understand all at once. Sometimes, life simply opened a door and waited for you to step through it. That was how their new journey began. One cold morning, the pianist received an email from a well-known international music festival. The organizers had seen the viral video of the heroic Polonaise and wanted to invite them as a young guest performer. It was an honor normally reserved for older musicians who had been training for many years. The pianist read the message twice, then a third time, unsure if their eyes were tricking them. When their mentor heard the news, he paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're ready," he said. "It will be different from anything you've experienced, but you're ready." Those words settled deep in the pianist's chest. They had always trusted their mentor's judgment. If he believed they could do it, then maybe they really could. Preparation for the festival became a new part of their routine. They practiced for long hours each day, not out of pressure, but out of excitement. They wanted to honor the chance they had been given. They wanted to bring something honest and meaningful to the stage. No matter how many experienced musicians would be performing alongside them. Their family watched with a new kind of understanding. They no longer worried that music would distract from responsibilities or lead nowhere. They saw how serious the pianist had become, how passionate, how determined. They supported them quietly, knowing this was a path the pianist had been building toward for years. When the day finally came to travel to the festival, the pianist felt a flutter of nerves. It was their first time leaving the country. Everything felt unfamiliar: the airport, the flight, the languages spoken around them. Yet there was also a sense of wonder. The world felt bigger than they had imagined, and they were stepping into it carrying something as simple and powerful as music. The festival city was full of energy. Posters hung on walls and street corners, displaying performers from around the world. Some were violinists, some cellists, some pianists, some conductors. Many of them had names the pianist recognized from recordings or interviews. It felt strange, walking past them in person. Rehearsals began quickly. The pianist was given a practice room with a glossy grand piano that responded beautifully to every touch. They spent hours exploring its sound, adjusting their technique, warming up for the performance that would come at the end of the week. During one of the rehearsals, an older pianist from another country stopped outside the door and listened. When the young performer finished the passage they were working on, he stepped in with a gentle smile. "Your playing has heart," he said kindly. "That is something not many young musicians understand. Keep it. Don't let pressure steal it from you." The young pianist thanked him, feeling humbled. It was moments like that, quiet, genuine connections, that reminded them why music mattered. When the night of the festival performance arrived, the hall was filled with people from many different places. Some were musicians themselves. Others were families, students, teachers, and music lovers. The energy felt different from the competition, less tense, more open, like a gathering of people who simply wanted to celebrate the beauty of sound. The pianist watched from backstage as other performers played. Some pieces were soft and delicate, others fast and full of fire. Each musician brought their own world to the stage, their own memories, their own emotions. When it was finally their turn, the pianist stepped onto the stage with steady steps. The lights felt warm on their skin, and the hall seemed to stretch out endlessly. Yet they did not feel afraid. They felt ready. They sat at the grand piano, let out a slow breath, and began to play. This time, the piece was not the heroic Polonaise. It was a different work one their mentor had chosen for them, one that told a gentler story. The music flowed like water, soft at first, then rising with emotion, then falling again with quiet grace. As the pianist played, they felt the same connection they had felt during the competition, the feeling that the piano was an extension of their own heart. They allowed the music to breathe, to move, to speak in its own way. They didn't worry about impressing anyone. They didn't worry about mistakes. They simply played. When the final note faded, the hall remained silent for a few seconds, as if everyone wanted to hold on to the moment. Then applause filled the space, warm and full. After the performance, many people approached the pianist backstage. Some were fellow musicians who wanted to compliment their sensitivity. Others were viewers who said the music made them feel calm, or inspired, or emotional. Each person expressed something different, but all of it touched the pianist deeply. One of the festival organizers pulled them aside near the end of the night. "You have a rare gift," she said kindly. "If you choose to continue down this path, the world will want to hear you." A pianist felt their hearts stir. It wasn't ambition that moved them, not fame or recognition. It was the idea of reaching people, of offering something gentle and sincere in a world that could be so loud. When they returned home after the festival, the young performer felt changed, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way. They had seen more of the world. They had met people from many places. And through it all, They had learned that music was a language that did not need translation. The mentor welcomed them back with a small smile. "How was it?" he asked. "Different," the pianist said softly. "But beautiful," he nodded. "Good. You needed to see what's out there. Now you know what you're working toward." The pianist continued training, practicing, and growing. They accepted some invitations, declined others, and stayed grounded by returning often to the community center where their journey began. Even as the world began to know their name, the old piano in that small room remained their anchor. Sometimes children from the neighborhood would gather around to listen. Some would ask questions, shy but curious. "How did you get so good?" They would ask. The pianist always answered with the same simple honesty. "By practicing a little every day, by listening, and by believing that music could take me somewhere, even when nothing else made sense." They did not try to make themselves sound extraordinary. They wanted the children to understand that dreams did not require perfect beginnings, only patience, effort, and heart. As time passed, the pianist began giving small lessons to kids who showed interest. They taught not with strict rules, but with gentleness, encouraging each child to find joy in the sound they created. Their mentor watched these moments with quiet approval. "You're becoming what music needs," he said one evening. "Someone who shares, not someone who only shines." Those words stayed with the pianist. There were still many performances ahead, many stages waiting, many people they would meet, offers. From international schools appeared. Orchestras asked them to join special events. Journalists wanted to write about their journey. But the pianist approached each opportunity carefully, never rushing, never letting outside noise drown the reason. They had started. They knew now that the world could be big and fast, and that success could come suddenly. But music, real music, was slow, thoughtful, patient, and that was how they wanted their journey to be. One evening, as they sat at home by the piano, they began to play the heroic Polonaise again, not for practice, not for a stage, but for themselves. The notes felt familiar, like an old friend, but they also felt new, shaped by everything the pianist had experienced since the competition. The music rose and fell, strong and emotional, like a reflection of the journey's highs and lows. And in that moment, the pianist understood something. Quietly beautiful. They were no longer playing the piece the same way they had as a 17-year-old competitor. They were playing it as someone who had grown, learned, traveled, and connected with people through sound. When the last chord faded into the evening light, the pianist smiled softly. Their journey was only beginning, and with every performance, every lesson, every moment of connection, they were not just breaking boundaries in music. They were opening doors for others to follow.